We're going to go ahead and get started. I saw a couple questions that actually came through about, can CGM replace BGM? If a woman's wearing CGM in pregnancy, does she still need to check premeal or postprandial readings? And so I'll throw this question to Dr. Brown to start with.
So I will just say the concept trial evaluated BGM plus CGM versus BGM. So we don't actually have a head-to-head of CGM alone versus BGM alone. And so we don't have that data. It would be interesting to have that data. My feeling about it is that that blood glucose monitoring offers a distinct time point before and 1 hour after each meal for patients to look, write down their readings, and then be able to look for patterns. The CGMs may not be quite as accurate as the blood glucose meters also. So I am still encouraging my patients to test their blood glucoses before and 1 hour after each meals. We have particular glucose targets for blood glucose monitoring for fasting and 1 hour after meals that people can look at those patterns.
Great, thank you. And kind of continuing on with that question, someone said they're really having trouble getting, even when they recommend for patients to check, that they actually adhere to checking. I'm just curious, Dr. Mehta, like your perspective on this question or what you guys do in the UK.
Yeah, so I think our practice is slightly different to the practice in US, and Dr. Brown is absolutely spot on in saying that when concept trial, they actually had the Medtronic real-time CGM, which was A, not licensed for use in pregnancy, and B, had to be calibrated. So you had to use your finger sticks. Whereas in the UK, when we say CGM, even in the NICE guidance, when they say CGM, they actually refer to real-time CGM. What we offer to women here is Dexcom G6, which is CE marked for use in pregnancy in European Union, as well as factory calibrated. So we do not encourage women. We don't tell them to routinely check their sugars with that. And I believe, and I think that, to me, I think is the biggest sort of quality of life or, sort of improvement. And it is a very, very, very intense pregnancy. And yes, we all want 100% brilliant sugars, but I think that taking away that, whatever, if they don't need to keep checking. And obviously we do tell them to check. And often these women have lived with diabetes, pretty much all their lives with type 1 diabetes. So they very well know that if their sugars are, they don't, sort of match their symptoms, then they will check. But it's not something that we proactively ask them to do, which is to be different to that. If they are on intermittent scanned CGM, then yes, which we know that the hypos tend to be more. This is my understanding. Again, I'm an obstetrician, I'm not an endocrinologist, but in the UK, real-time CGM, we do not actively encourage women to do the finger sticks.
Thanks so much for providing that perspective. Dr. Mike, I have an additional question for you that came through about how do you engage primary care in preparing patients for pregnancy, and how do you engage your patient? And then continuing, the same person also asked, how do you engage the midwifery team and trainees in the process of learning CGM and managing these patients?
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant question because so how things are in the UK is that type 1 diabetes tends to be with the hospital settings, type 2 tends to be with the community, with the GPs. So obviously a lot of preconceptional counseling lies with the GPs. We do teaching sessions for the GPs, and a lot of these women will come through us. We run teaching sessions and preconception counseling clinics as well. But I think a lot of responsibility does lie with the GPs for type 2s. With the type 1s, as soon as they're adolescents, you are taught and, we take it through them. But unfortunately, like I said, when you look at our data, 1 in 8 of our women are not entering pregnancy well. There are a lot of structured education programs out there which are free, but unfortunately the uptake is very poor. So clearly we need to do more. I mean, definitely. But we engage as much as we can with the GPs. And as far as the obstetric and midwifery side is concerned, given that the number of women with diabetes is sort of exponentially increasing, especially the gestational diabetes. I mean, at least in our unit, I can speak pretty much there'd be no day in an obstetric unit where you will not have a woman with diabetes in pregnancy. But it's not something that the midwives or obstetric trainees are taught to a very high level. And if you are in a setting where you have a lot of support from the endocrine team 24/7, it's quite easy. If you don't, then it can be quite challenging to manage these women. So it's really important. So we run courses for our midwives, we run courses for our trainees, and we are hoping to drive it a bit more, because given that the number of women with diabetes in pregnancy is increasing, and I think that is something that should be looked at nationally as well. Yeah.
Thank you. We have another good question that came through. I'm going to throw this one to Dr. Brown. It's about how there's a lag time with CGM. And so let's say you have a patient who's not doing finger sticks. So you just have the CGM data to look at. If you're trying to focus on like 1 hour or 2 hour postprandial, do you look at 2 hours and 20 minutes or 1 hour and 20 minutes because you want to take into account that lag time?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I think you have to add 20 minutes on because of the lag time. So again, it's a little hard with the CGM to know which data point are you going to choose, since it's continuous. I think it's confusing for patients to figure that out. We definitely want the fasting blood glucoses to be under 100, probably somewhere like 70 to 95. Some people say 70 to 99 milligrams per deciliter, and I don't know what that is in millimoles per liter off the top of my head. But and then the 1 hour blood glucoses to be, say, 100 to 140. And so which on the curve, which do you pick? And generally it should be the peak postprandial. Whenever the peak postprandial is the glucose level that you want to choose.
Yeah, I totally agree. I tend to focus on what that peak is and trying to see if it's, stays under 140 or not. Great. We have a lot of questions about the use of CGM in gestational diabetes or pre-existing type 2 diabetes. So wondering if we can hear, Dr. Brown, we can start with you again, your experience with that and your thoughts on using it in those populations.
I think it's overkill for patients with gestational diabetes. I think it's CGM would be too much information. People with type 1 diabetes need it for hypoglycemia unawareness. I think it wouldn't be a great use of resources for patients with gestational diabetes, just confuse them. And we're looking at their blood glucoses again, fasting and 1 hour or 2 hours postprandial. That's what you need. You don't need the in-between times so much. For type 2 diabetes, it depends. There's some patients with type 2 diabetes that are on 4 shots of insulin a day. They may have some hypoglycemia as well, and so they may benefit from a CGM. But if your patient with type 2 diabetes is, mild, similar to somebody with like gestational diabetes, they may not need that. But it's so based really on your impression of that patient and the seriousness of their diabetes.
Thanks. Dr. Mehta, curious on your thoughts, or even if you can get it for these types of patients in the UK.
So I totally agree with Dr. Brown. Again, there's limited evidence for both type 2 and GDM, so we don't have the evidence for it. But I would just say that yes, we have used for several of our type 2s because I do believe that like I said, type 2s are looked after in community. Some of them, when they come to see you in the clinic, because we do the clinics with the endocrine consultants, we sit together. Often we do feel that some women are mislabeled as type 2 and are not type 2. That is one thing. And if they are insulin dependent and other issues like, say, mental health issues, they've got, they're not really checking, and this is sort of the best bet, then yes, we go with it. So, you'll pick and choose your patients. Not all, but the ones we have picked and choose, yes, we have been able to get the funding, and it definitely makes a difference to their blood sugars. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with the points. We unfortunately don't have really, evidence in gestational diabetes. We're actually going to be doing a study here at Cleveland Clinic trying to look at that because we really need to build evidence to determine, is it useful, is it worth the cost or not? Would it be, information overload, or would it be helpful? So yeah, we need to accrue more evidence.
And
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. No, like you said, I think that's quite interesting because just one point to say with GDM and type 2, I sometimes feel that we should be treating them as a continuum as well, because last year when we changed our guidance of doing, how we, obviously screening GDM is like, the whole world does it differently, and, what your values for GTT are. So we moved to HbA1c instead of GTT in COVID, purely because of, having so many women come into the hospital to do the test. And we picked up so many type 2s, at booking, with the high HbA1c. So I just feel that, I'm not giving an answer here, but I just feel that, sometimes the women you pick up with gestational diabetes, were pre-existing diabetes. So I think there's no right answer to it, but yes, I feel that it's a continuum, the type 2 and the GDMs. Yeah.
So I know we're running short on time, but this one should be a quicker question. People want to know, where should you place the CGM sensor in pregnancy? Like, what would be the optimal sites?
Well, I think the G6 is approved for the abdomen, but off-label, people use their arms, and I think they're fairly accurate, but it is off-label. The Freestyle Libre 2, the intermittently scanning device, is approved for use on the arms.
Yeah, and I've only ever seen them on the arms, pregnant women. Yeah.
I think, abdomen, for obvious reasons, is sometimes preferable to avoid. And it's interesting because even though, it's true, Dexcom G6 is approved for the abdomen, there was a study that showed in pregnancy that the accuracy was actually better in the back of the upper arms. Yeah. So those are things. And sometimes we consider other off-label sites like the legs, upper buttocks, get kind of creative with that. Well, I want to thank our speakers today. Just absolutely incredible. I'm so grateful for all of your information.